Hi there! So in this tutorial we will be drawing some rocks and the sea. For that I will be using my usual Arteza sketchbook, and here I have already prepared some of the colors that I will be using, so I want to keep kind of a limited palette here, and also a little sketch of how my composition is actually going to look. So I do these sketches before I start drawing, and this way I can already see where I want my lightest and darkest areas. So here I still did not add the white. So as I'm going to be using also the color of the paper as a tone in this case. So I'm looking at my reference photo and I'm going to be adding the white into the places. Here, don't be precious about it. Just go and add the tones in large kind of not even drawing out the shapes completely, just in large shapes, how they look in the picture, just so you know where you have the relationship between the lightest and the darkest colors. So this is my approximate idea of the thumbnail sketch. So I know that I will have the main rock close to the bottom of my image. And it's done in charcoal. Also, if you haven't seen the previous videos, I always do the sketch in charcoal and then some white pastel if you need to add the white spots just to see where the lightest areas are. And now we can start drawing the big picture. So I'll be using my Arteza sketchbook. It's a neutral gray. I really like this color for seascapes. And we will start by deciding how large we want our picture plane to be. So this is approximately the size that I will be working with. Here I have my color swatches, and as this is a sketch, I don't want to frame it. It's okay that I have my color swatches on the same paper. It's very important that you see your colors on the color of the paper and on the kind of the paper that you are going to be drawing, so that you know how that color is going to actually look like. So let's start. I'm going to look at my reference photo and just add the rocks. Let's kind of draw off the edge of this charcoal. So if I know that this charcoal doesn't draw, sorry. Let's see if this one is better. It's a new charcoal, so it doesn't draw good. But I know that my rocks are going to be the darkest thing in all the drawing, so I will be adding them completely in charcoal. So I can create that shape in charcoal altogether and not worry about it having to be light. Anyway, if you go over the areas of where you want your rocks to be, you can always remove it with a kneaded eraser. So it's very easily done. If you don't know what a kneaded eraser is, so this is just something that's very pliable, this eraser. I have actually two in here, and it really, really works with charcoal. You can lift out as much charcoal as you want. It's also great for pastel. So here I'm going to add that shape of my main rock. Then here I have the water shining through, and there's this other rock going on top. Again, you don't need to copy exactly the way you see your rocks. Here no one can tell you that you did something wrong, but just go approximately with the shapes that you see. So this is one rock and this is the other one, and I see that this one I can lower it just a bit. Okay, so you can see this is just blobs of, not even color, blobs of charcoal. Then I'm looking that I really like this rock that's poking out in the back here, and one a bit higher up, and it's showing through the water there. So this rock, it's kind of being covered by the water as it's deeper there. And also let's add the ones in the background here. Okay, so now we have our rocks in place. Now what's left to do is, what we can do, we can just rub them in a bit, just so that they don't go anywhere. Now we will give them more shape by adding the darks. And I'm looking at those shapes that I see that are created by the shadows. So here I'm working more with the tip of the charcoal, so it gives me a darker color, a darker tone. So this is going to be the first shape. I see here that there is a difference between the planes of the rock, and then here there's another plane and it's kind of broken. It's not a flat rock, so I need to be careful in showing that. Also, when you're drawing rocks near the water, you always will have reflections. So with the reflections, we can do this, simply dragging the tone down. So we will be doing the same thing with our pastel as well. Here I see that there is a bit of darkness as there is the shadow created on these rocks as well. So it's not, we don't see the thickness of these rocks as much as with these, the ones that are closer to us. So I see a bit of shadow forming here, and also there is another plane of the rock. It's forming here, and then there are some darker areas to the rock itself, but there we will add the color with the pastel just to make it more interesting. And the same thing goes here. So I'm looking that here there is this plane change, so we see our rock broken line of the plane change, and again we will have a bit of reflection here and here as the water is not calm, it's moving, so we won't have the same amount of reflection everywhere like this. And now I'm looking that there is a darker part on top here, just marking it for myself just so that I remember that it's a darker area. And also going here there is a crevice. Okay, so now that we're starting to add colors, I want to start with my neutral tones that are closer to the paper, and I will start with the blues that I see on in the sea. So we will start working from the back towards us, and I have this blue, so it's this one, that is a very nice color for the sea. I think this is a Rembrandt or a Koh-i-Noor, can't remember. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this color everywhere where I don't have my lightest areas. So here there's still, okay, here I went in too far, but we can add the water there as well. So I'm adding it all over. If you go into your rocks, don't worry, rocks are reflecting the color of the sea, so it's perfectly okay to have that color in our rocks as well. So here I see that there is a bit of blue happening here, and notice how I'm moving horizontally. I'm not moving vertically because the sea is a flat surface, and every time that you draw water you want to move in horizontal direction. Okay, now I want to add a bit of this neutral violet that's going to tone down a bit the blue in my sea for the moment. So I just want to create a tone that's going to be the tone of our sea, and then we will add more details to it. And this is also going to allow us to have the same color in the foam and make the picture look more kind of come together, because I don't want to use different colors on each and every single area of my drawing. What I want to do now is I want to clean my hands, so I have a little cleaning thing here. And now what I'm going to do is gently, I will rub without trying to ruin the texture too much, because I really like how the texture of the paper actually shines through here. And this is going to create that beautiful kind of shimmering sensation in our sea. So there's no white reflecting here, but as the paper is a nice gray tone, it's going to help us create that appearance of the sea. So very gently I'm rubbing in these colors. Don't worry if you go over the rocks, as I said, we'll bring those back. Okay, so here. Here the trick is not to press too hard, because if you do press too hard, what's going to happen is you're going to eliminate completely the texture of the paper. We don't want that. So I'm just going over all the areas and gently rubbing it in. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to create a bit of those darker areas in my water. And I'm going to use this brighter blue for now, and very, very gently I'm going to go over some areas where I see those kind of shadows forming in the water. So where there are little ripples happening. And again, I'm going to rub it away, especially here in the back. It's kind of further from us, so we don't need to leave it as detailed. Here I'm going to add a bit of this blue color into the water, just to make it slightly darker. So the closer to us, the darker the water is becoming. The same is going to happen here. And here we can almost leave the texture. So very gently rubbing it away. Okay. For now, let's leave the water and let's go into our rocks. We're still not adding any lights to our foam area, so we will switch onto our rocks. Now for the rocks, we will start with our lighter parts, and I have different colors prepared here that we will be mixing together. So this is the closest color to our paper, and this is going to be a slightly darker color. So these are going to be the colors that I will be using for my light areas, or for the flat top surface of the rocks. And I see that these rocks, the ones that are closer to me, are lighter, and the one on the back is kind of slightly greenish even, and it's darker, and that actually is going to help me show the distance, as here I will have a bigger contrast between shadows and darks, and this is going to kind of make my drawing have more depth, as less contrast is going to show us that the object is slightly further away. So I'm going to start with the color that is closest to the paper. And here I'm going to move into these directions, changing the position of my hand constantly, because rocks are not even. So I see that there are plane breaks all over this rock. First I'm adding one color, and I see that there is a bit of this rock here. So the same color I'm going to be adding in the lightest places where I see them on this rock here. So there's kind of a light line happening over here. And also here. So if you notice, because these rocks are wet and they are kind of reflecting the color of the sky, we need something violet to actually show that, something violet blue, I would say, that to actually show the water on the surface of these rocks. So this is too bright. Let's see. I think we can use the same violet that we were using for the sea to actually show that water on our rocks. So here I can feel that kind of direction of this rock goes that way. So it lies flat that way. And I'm already starting to create that edge between my lights and darks. Here there's the sharp edge happening here as well. Also here it might not look as wet, but we will add this violet color just to kind of create the illusion of this rock being wetted by the sea. And closer to the edge here it gets more wet, so it has more violets reflecting. Okay, so also here we have the sky reflecting in the water that's there on the rock. We will be adding blues there in a second as well. Okay, also on this further rock. Now I'm going to take blue, so very, very gently. So this is our bright blue, but very, very gently I'm going to add this color into here. So you see that I am not pushing the pastel hard. I am only gently, gently adding that blue color that reflects in those puddles and in those wetter areas. So again, using the same colors all over, we're going to create the appearance of our image being kind of all together. So it's not going to seem as if we have the image built out of different building blocks. Okay, so here there's quite a wet puddle, so it's quite blue here. Okay. Next, I'm going to start adding the darker areas, and I'm using these earthy colors, so this one and this one. So let's start with a slightly lighter one. We're gonna start creating different planes on our rocks and different colors in our rocks. So this is the fun part of drawing rocks, is that you can go crazy with their shapes and you're not going to go wrong. So again, using the texture of the paper, we are adding the color to the rocks and creating that texture of the surface of the rocks as well, just by slightly adding the pastel, touching the paper with the pastel. Okay, and I also want to add a slightly lighter greener color in those areas where we have the plane change here. So it's very close to the color of the paper, as you can see, but I want to emphasize this edge of the rock. So we divide it a bit from the shadows and from the water, and also here. So we're creating that edge of the planes just a bit sharper. And remember, our rocks are not even, so the edge will be broken. Okay. Now I want to go into my darker color, and let's add the darker areas into our rocks. We can start adding this color into the rocks that are further away as well. Okay. And now let's start adding some shadows to our rocks. For the shadows, I'm going to be using this dark blue. I really like it. It's a unison color. Also, Sennelier has a very nice dark blue, so it's even darker here. We'll be kind of using the two of them. And now I'm looking at the shape of my shadow. And here we have the reflection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it down a bit, like so. Also, we have the plane change here. So I'm just going over those areas that I had done in charcoal. And also here there's going to be just a bit of reflection. There's a darker area here and also some darker areas over here. Okay, I see that here on the back the rock kind of changes its color also and it gets quite dark. Then these areas, the ones that I like, they're particularly dark and that don't have such a huge difference in contrast as the front ones. I'm just adding the shadow at the bottom, and also here on the side we can add a bit of this dark just to create the illusion of another rock forming there. Same goes here. And this is our closest rock, so it has to be the most detailed one. Like so. And here we're creating that edge. And again, as we have the reflection in the water, so we see that in some places it does reflect, so we're dragging the color down. In some places it doesn't. So because of the waves going back and forth, some places have reflection and some don't. So the shape we're forming here. Also here there are some lines on that rock that are created by a little plane change. Okay. Now I'm going to take a darker blue, this is the Sennelier blue, and I'm going to add it closer to the areas where I see that beautiful contrast happening. The broken edge. So here we can start adding some crevices. So I'm not covering all of it now, I'm just adding it into the blue that we used already. Okay. There are some crevices here, also some darker colors happening on the rock here. Okay, and also here we're going to add just a bit of this darker blue. And now we can move on to add more details. Okay, so now it's time to add more blues to our sea, and also let's throw in some greens. So I have some nice greens here that are not very bright. So let's add these greens into the water. So the color of the water, here I see this greenish tint. And also on the edges here on the rock, there's some green reflecting as well. Maybe there's some algae growing there. Okay, then these rocks definitely are greener also. And the rock over here is kind of greenish too. Just to keep everything united, I'm going to add some greens over here as well. And we will need a darker green. This is not dark enough. I'm going to find my darker green. Okay, so this is actually more of a, it's a very dark green. Let's see. So in the shadows, I'm going to add this dark green as well in places. Just to show that green water reflecting in the shadows as well. Okay, just a bit of dark green to show those ripples. And not getting carried away with this dark green the further away we go. Now I have my bright blue, and this is going to give us that color of the sea. And here we need to pay attention where the sky is reflecting. There our water is going to look lighter. And here in the back, what I want to do is I want to leave less texture. So if close to us, I can leave more texture in the water, and that's going to give us the ripples. Then further away, those ripples are going to be further off and they're going to be less textured. Okay. Now I'm going to take my blue and go into these areas and see that there are the holes in the foam. Okay, so looking at the places where I see the blue actually shining through the foam. Okay, and here I want to make sure that my edge of the rock is clear, so I'm going to blend these for now. And let's add those shadows into the water. So here where there are the ripples, the shadows will go also not only in the vertical direction, we will drag them down, but also they'll kind of form slightly horizontally as well. Okay, and also here. So we're showing that this is reflecting, and now we're going to be adding our lights to actually show where the water is kind of touching the rocks. And I'm going in with the blue that I was using for the sea again. Here I'm going to tone this bright blue down a bit because it's far away. Okay, and here let's start adding those lighter areas in the water where the waves kind of curve around and move and the water becomes lighter and the reflection is distorted, like so. Also here we have some water touching the rock on this side, and there's this reflection happening. And the same goes over here. And here we have this darker greenish color in the water. The reflection. Okay, now let's work on the foam. So now that we have to start working on the foam, we will use multiple colors. The first color is going to be the closest color to our paper. That's going to be the shadows in our foam. Even though it looks like the foam doesn't have the shadows, this is going to help us create that texture more. So I'm passing over with this color over the areas where I have my foam. So here we will have the foam happening. Okay, also here I'm looking that there are very tiny kind of pieces of foam forming here, and also on this side, like so. Then we have a bit of foam happening here, even though here I didn't add it, so if you want you can add this area here. And like so. Now I'm going to go, believe it or not, into pinks and yellows. So I have this light yellow. Where's my light yellow? There it is. Took the wrong one, took the white. So with the light yellow, I'm going to start adding those brightest areas. And I see that here in the back, for example, there is very few of that foam visible. It's kind of going away, but over here, it's brighter. And now with this foam, we're going to create, with the color of this foam, we're going to create the shape of our rock. Like so. And there's a bit of the foam on the back here. And again, as I said, it's going to help us define and create the shape of that rock. The same goes here. Just barely touching the paper where there's a bit of foam. Defining the shape. Like so. Here I take my pastel and I'm going to drag it over the color that we have already laid in here and create those little foam lines that we see creating on the surface of the water. So it's not completely foamy here, but it does have a bit of foam texture over the top. Now we're going into here and I'm looking at how my foam is actually forming the shapes. So don't treat it as foam, treat it as a shape. Where you see those white shapes, that's your foam. And here actually I forgot to add my rock. So there's another blue rock happening here. You can add it like so, and again with the shadow just defining the edge of that rock. So coming a bit back here just to add more of that shadow so it's more defined. Okay, and going back into my light yellow. And adding that foam over here. Once again, as I said, we're defining the shape of the rock with the color of our foam. Can create a bit of those lines over here, the ones that the foam kind of, it's like a spider web that the foam creates. And here we have a very bright spot. You can lead it away like this. Okay, here I have those bright areas where the rocks actually create this kind of a path in between for the foam. And this is going to help us again to define the edges between the foam and the rocks. And if you notice, very close to the rocks, where the foam actually hits the rocks, it actually creates these sharper lines. Okay, also here we can add some of that foam. Once again, leaving the texture of the paper in place. Here you can see these kind of spiderweb patterns on the foam. Also here to give it more contrast. And here I'm gonna add that shadow again because I kind of rubbed it away. Okay. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna take the same yellow color and we're going to add just a bit of those areas where the rock changes the plane. We're gonna add just a tiny amount of this, the same yellow that we have on the foam, and also in some places where there are lighter planes on our rocks. Cleaning my fingers. So there are some lines happening on our rocks. They're not even, we have to keep that in mind. And we're doing this only for the rocks that are closer to us. So we emphasize that broken edge. and we unite the picture with the same colors. Like so. Also a little bit, let's add a bit of light here. So we're kind of making that edge come forward because it has more contrast in it. Next, let's move into the whites. And now I'm going to add the brightest parts in our foam. So this is the plain white. And I'm adding it closer to where the rocks meet the foam. And also in the areas where we already have left our yellows. So here there's quite a bright patch. Like so. Going over this area a bit again. Here, let's make it this edge a bit more broken. And what we can do here, we can pretend that there's more spray happening. So from behind the rocks, we have more spray happening. Also here, just to separate our rocks, we can add a bit of spray happening. And also here. You can add these, a bit of pastel just by grating the finger. On the back here as well. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll over my pencil like this and then just swipe away in the same direction, so how my spray would go. Now I want to add back some of the blues if we lost some of those blue windows here. Like so, and add more detail on the rock itself. So there are some crevices happening here. So here there might be something. Here I'm going to pass over with my dark green just to create more texture to the rock. Okay. I'm just lightly brushing over with the pastel, and because of the paper, it's going to create that beautiful appearance of the rocky texture. Creating those little crevices in the rock. Like so. And I'm going to clean here the areas where I have the white, where it went into my shadows. And what I want to do is I want to add a bit of this green into my shadows as well, so it reflects water better. And this is basically it. We have created our rocks and the sea. The only thing is I don't like this spray particularly a lot on the back here, and here actually can go with the color of the paper to add that sense of distance, like so. Okay, so we can go on forever here. The best way to do is to actually stop at a certain point. Otherwise, we're going to get too carried away. So this is it. Our rocks on the sea are all done.